There are times when the mundane can become a living nightmare, like when casually driving through a tunnel only to have it collapse on us. We'll need to gather all the resources and willpower we can in order to make it out alive and beat the tunnel in the film Tunnel. Let's go. We open with a man named Lee Jung-so getting fuel at the full-service gas station. The attendant is hard of hearing though, so they mistakenly put in a full tank instead of the smaller amount that Lee asked for. To compensate for this, they give him 2 free bottles of water. It's water, okay, a vital resource. We should graciously accept it when offered. It could come in handy, whether in crisis or not. Lee today is on his way home and recklessly eats while driving and also talks on a cell phone. Things that you shouldn't do. He is talking to his wife Se-hyun, telling her he got the cake for their daughter, whose birthday it is today. Lee eventually switches to an incoming call from a client while driving into a tunnel. Since the name of the film is Tunnel, we can guess that this is where things are about to go down. Literally. Lee is happy to have made a deal with the client, but that joy turns to fear moments after hanging up when he starts hearing a loud creaking noise coming from the section he just drove past. The lights go out completely before turning back on. He looks freaked out by all of this, but decides to continue driving. Suddenly, the top of the tunnel starts caving in, causing some chunks of rock to land on his car, before a huge section collapses and the screen goes dark. Alright, there wasn't much we could have done differently here to avoid this situation, right? Once inside the tunnel, when we heard the creaking noise, we could have made a U-turn and gone back to the entrance. But turning in a tunnel can be dangerous and take a bit of time too. So the other option is to drive as fast as possible to get out the opposite side. Speeding in a tunnel can be dangerous too, but with the lack of other cars on the road and the massive threat a collapse poses, it is probably worth a shot. The biggest risk of going too fast here is running directly into a slower car in front of us, or running into fallen debris. However, going too slow, like Lee here, will almost guarantee us getting crushed. You see, cars are built to withstand impacts with other vehicles or obstacles in front of them. They are not, however, built to withstand an impact from the roof. So, if I had to pick between just a chance of running into something during an escape attempt, or a near certainty of having a mountainside crashing into my car from above, I am choosing the high-speed route. Lee survives this, since there is far too much of the movie left to kill him off now. We call this plot armor within acceptable parameters. He is still in his car at this point, with lots of rocks, dirt, and metal covering almost everything around him. Lots of debris has found its way into the vehicle too, but for the most part it is miraculously intact. The first thing he does is get the overhead lights on, then checks his phone and tries reaching out for help. Now help can come for us if they don't know that we are in trouble, and even if something as major as a collapsed tunnel is noticed fairly quickly, they won't know of any survivors inside if we don't inform someone of that fact. Thankfully, Lee's phone still works, but he can't get a signal. This is a good time to remember that even if you can't get a signal, call emergency services. Cell phones will connect to the strongest signal nearby automatically for emergencies if one is available. He is lucky today as help eventually does indeed answer. He lets them know what happened and where at. When in situations like this, where time is of essence, we need to give the information quickly and concisely before we possibly lose the signal again. Tell them your location first, then what happened exactly, then your name, status of health, and any other information worth sharing, such as informing on certain hazards like fire, gas leakage, etc. It should be done in this order so that if the call gets disconnected for whatever reason, rescuers should have enough information to start heading your way and helping you. Once help is on the way, we should call family, friends, and other people who would care about our well-being. Not only does this put them at ease, but it also allows them to be able to get help for us in case that the rescuers we called don't come for some reason. This is of course less likely to happen with something as major as a tunnel collapsing, but it's still important to remember that everything that can go wrong will go wrong. We see Lee grab one of the water bottles given to him by the gas attendant, and he guzzles a bunch of it down. He shouldn't be doing this though. We need to try and make any of our water supplies last. Yes, help may be on the way, but it could take a very long time to actually get to us. With water being the most important resource for our bodies after oxygen, we need to ration it appropriately. A situation this major should get a lot of people and city or state officials involved in fixing, which should mean better chances of getting rescued. We just have to hold out until that happens. We should make an inventory of everything we have access to in the car, from food and water to any other supplies. We should also remain calm and control our breathing, both to help in case we do have limited oxygen, and to prevent us from panicking and making worse decisions. These are basic survival tactics, obviously, for any situation, not just surviving a tunnel cave-in. Sometime later, Lee gets a phone call. It is a news reporter broadcasting their phone conversation live for their channel. They say that talking to them could secure Lee's rescue and inform him of just how bad the collapse actually is, with the entrance he took being completely covered to the point that no trace of it remains. He continues to talk to them, asking questions in disbelief and trying to get answers for just how long a rescue will take. Now, I personally wouldn't want to bother talking to the media. Yes, putting our situation out into the view of the public could get us more attention and rescue efforts, and making things personal with our own voice and words could get more sympathy and therefore help from others. However, as another character will mention very soon, we have limited battery supply, and wasting it on needless conversations means we have less power for talking about situation updates and our exact location to rescuers. The eventual isolation from the lack of communication could also put us in a worse mental state, making it easier to panic and survival that much harder. Plus, I for one wouldn't want to promote a news station glorifying and profiting from my tragic situation. So overall, if we're going to say anything to anyone really, make it short and try to appeal to the sympathy of others, like simply, please help me. During Lee's interview, we see the task force chief Kim Dae-hyung furious about the phone conversation. He finds the news van responsible and gets them to quit talking with the previously mentioned facts of Lee's limited battery and the potential panic from isolation. Lee then calls the task force shortly after and is demanding answers. Kim explains the full situation, gets him to calm down as much as possible, and tries to gather all the information he can. He first asks about any supplies Lee has, and Lee tells them of his limited food and water, basically the birthday cake that was meant for his daughter and the 2, well now 1.5, bottles of water. Kim tells him to ration these, especially the water, and not to let the water touch his lips while drinking to prevent bacteria from contaminating it, which I think is great advice when trying to make water last as long as possible. He also tells Lee, and this is pretty revealing, to plan on making these supplies last a week, although, of course, they will try to get him out sooner than that. Kim then asks a few more questions to try and figure out precisely where Lee is at in the tunnel so that they can rescue him quickly. He doesn't know exactly how far in he drove before the collapse, but confirms that he didn't see the exit before it happened. From his current position, he is able to see an industrial ceiling fan that fell on his car's hood. Using this knowledge, the task force looks at some tunnel blueprints and pins down where all the fans are located at to get an idea where Lee could be. Finally, Kim says to keep the phone off to preserve battery life and that they would call at noon every day to check on him. Now, I don't know how they expected Lee to know when noon is exactly, unless he has a watch on or something, but thankfully the car's clock is still working, so he is able to use that. If the car's overhead lights and clock are still working, then the charging port of the car should still be working too. We never see Lee attempt to charge his phone though, so maybe this broke during the collapse, we don't know. Regardless, we know that the battery is still working and should count on that, the car and its fuel in our limited resources and tools. Currently, it is our only light source and our only way of knowing what time it is, so keeping it functional is quite important. We eventually see later in the film that Lee does have the car running this entire time, meaning he is just using up its fuel. Cars use significantly less while stationary, and thankfully he just got a full tank by accident, so should be good for a while there. But still, with fuel being limited, we should try to save it whenever possible. It will also be putting out exhaust that could limit our amount of fresh air, so turn the car off when not in use is probably the best idea. As for the battery life of the car, that should remain good as long as we run the car every now and then. For those who aren't aware, car batteries stay charged thanks to the alternator, a part that converts the mechanical energy of the engine into electrical signals. So while the car is idling here, the battery should be recharging. So now we know the extent of the situation, gathered all of our supplies, and are fairly assured that help is on the way. Our choices now are to sit tight and wait for rescue or attempt to escape on our own by digging our way out. This may seem tempting, especially with rescuing likely to take such a long time, however it is very risky. The biggest risk is causing another collapse. The ground around us isn't fully stable, as we can see some dirt and debris still falling from time to time and hear things shifting. Moving the rocks and earth chunks around could cause even more to fall and crush us, and we would probably lose the already limited protection that the car provides. The next biggest issue is that it takes a lot of energy to lift and move rocks, especially without any proper tools. We don't know exactly how far we would have to dig for, but we know it's probably a lot. We would very likely burn through our limited resources and exhaust ourselves before we made any real progress, so I think this is a time to sit back, try to relax, and let the professionals handle it. The next day, those professionals are sending in drones into the opposite entrance to see the extent of the damage. But there is too much interference from the ore in the mountainside, so the chief and a colleague must drive inside. While at the edge of the collapse, they happen to honk their car. Lee calls them and says that he has heard it. They are excited that they may be able to get him out soon, but witness a lot more debris start falling around them and a second collapse starts to happen. They get into their car and floor it out in reverse, barely managing to avoid being buried. Now, whether the honking of their car horn caused a second collapse or not, it was a pretty good idea to narrow down Lee's location. Now, thanks to the shifting from the second collapse, Lee now is able to see a number 3 on the side of the fan in front of his car. This gives the rescuers a much better idea of where he is in the tunnel. So now the task force plan is twofold: a vertical rescue where they will drill down over where fan number 3 should be, as well as a horizontal rescue where they will excavate from the south entrance. Always a good idea to have multiple plans in case one isn't successful. Meanwhile, on day 3 by the way, we see Lee doing a good job of maintaining his food and water. Don't see where he is using the bathroom though, but I don't think we need to see that. He plays with stuff he finds in his trunk through his backseat. Now, he really should have done this on day 1 to find additional supplies, but better late than never. Now he has some flashlights, washer fluids, and soccer equipment. After putting on a jersey, he sees movement outside of the car. Getting a better look with his flashlight, he sees it's a dog, a small pug with a collar. He calls out to it and hears another voice. A woman trapped in another car. Now, not sure how she went almost 3 days without making a sound, but maybe she was knocked out, who knows, or only able to be heard after the shifting from that second collapse. Regardless of that though, Lee tries to get to her. He has to climb through the fan tube in front of him and injures himself while doing so. Now, we should really take the time to clean this wound right now to avoid any infection. Infections are a serious problem, even if it seems like we will die of dehydration before that point. Lee is actually able to make it to the girl, whose name is Mina. Her dog, Tenji, is completely unhurt, but she herself is pinned in place by a giant slab of concrete that Lee can't seem to move. Now, after introducing themselves and informing her of the rescue operation happening right now, she asks for some water. Now, we have a massive moral choice to make here. Either share our limited resources with her and Tenji, or selfishly hoard it for ourselves. The cold, logical tactic here would be to refuse to share, or possibly even hide the fact that we have anything at all. She is not very likely to survive anyway and has nothing to offer us in return. Helping them will only dwindle our own limited resources and could cause all of us to die instead of just them. However, I wouldn't want to be rescued knowing that I didn't do everything I could to help others in need. I mean, imagine living with that for the rest of your lives. That's a pretty good setup for PTSD, my friends. And with rescue hopefully close at hand, they all have a decent chance of survival if they ration accordingly. So I would go with the warm logic, strategy of sharing, which is also what Lee does. He pours some water into her mouth, then even pours some into his hand for Tenji to drink, at Mina's request. She does drink a lot, however, and Lee should really be more assertive and tell her when to stop since their lives are on the line. Mina's cell phone is smashed as well, so he then lets her use his phone by holding it up for her, again sharing another limited resource. However, maybe we could use Mina's car to charge our phone with its charging port. They never attempt this in this film, so I guess hers just happens to be broken as well, who knows. After she talks to her mom, he sets her radio to classical music, puts a flashlight in her hand and crawls back to his car to enjoy a bit of cake before falling asleep. He then wakes up to find Tenji eating all of the remaining cake he had in the box and curses at him before pouting. Now, losing the remaining food like this is terrible, but we have only ourselves to blame for not securing it better, right? Lee easily could have put some rocks over it, or even better, placed it in his trunk that only he has access to. But since he just got introduced to a dog being in the equation, I guess he wasn't thinking about that. But hey, bright side, at least the dog is taken care of for now, and the more important water still remains as well. Sometime later, Mina calls for Lee. She apparently experiences some bad pain and would like some more water. Lee goes to get some, but they only have about 1/4 of a single bottle remaining. Still, he goes to share some with her. When he returns, however, Mina is completely silent and motionless. He tries to wake her and even pours out some water for her, wasting a lot in the process with his now shaking hands. With adrenaline pumping and desperate to help her, he is finally able to move the slab pinning her, but sees she was stabbed by some Reaper this entire time. This is rough. I don't blame Lee for any of his reactions here, but we need to try and keep a level head. Wasting water like this will only make things worse. And exerting ourselves after Mina is dead helps no one and drains ourselves further. We need to accept her fate and focus everything else on keeping ourselves and possibly Tenji alive and well. Even with her death, it was not a waste of resources to help her, at least in my opinion. At the very least, we can take solace in knowing we helped her final moments be more comfortable. The next day, Chief Kim is talking to Lee, apologizing and saying that they will hopefully be there soon. He also instructs Lee to collect his urine in one of the bottles and drink that for hydration. This, contrary to many beliefs, including some of my past scripts, sorry for that, is actually a terrible idea. In fact, the army itself has a field manual for survival situations. There is a list in it called "Do Not Drink," even when you're starving. Among that list are fish juices, blood, seawater, and also urine. In fact, urine and seawater aren't that much different in composition. Both contain enough salt to dehydrate you even further despite the water content. So, don't drink urine. It is now day 9 after the initial collapse. Lee is collecting urine, again don't do this, when Tenji wakes up with something stuck in the fur near his mouth. It's dry dog food. Lee goes looking for the source and finds a half-eaten bag of it. He then divvies it up and shares it with Tenji, keeping the lion's share for himself since Tenji ate the cake before. I wouldn't be eating that stuff myself though, not because it's gross but because of the sodium. Lee even mentions it's salty. While it's good to keep our energy up, it's bad to dehydrate ourselves further, which is exactly what this kind of food would do. Lee does seem to learn from his past mistake here though, and hides the remainder of the bag inside his trunk so the dog can't get to it. He then gets the bright idea of trying on Tenji's shock collar. Not sure why you would do that. It's basically used to stop dogs from barking. Lee of course gets zapped, but the jolt causes him to spasm and bump the floor, knocking down a rock that was in the way. This allows him to exit the vehicle and stand in a room-sized gap next to the car that was blocked before. After stretching, he starts exploring the area. Now, it may be dangerous outside of the car, as the tunnel could collapse further and crush us, but with desperate need for supplies and the slim chance of finding something useful, I would explore as well. Lee finds an emergency firehouse, but it seems damaged and completely dried out, as a centipede crawls out of the nozzle. He gets a phone call from Chief Kim at the same time, who tells him that they should reach him in 10 days. Lee scratches numbers on the side of his car up to 24. Now, there is no way that he would survive that long without water. On average, people can only go about 3 days without hydration. Without any new incoming source of H2O, Lee will be dead days before they reach him. Even sooner if he's drinking his urine as instructed. On top of that, Kim mentions he drank his own urine as a sign of solidarity with Lee. This is still awful advice, but I guess we can admire Kim's dedication, maybe? I don't know, up to you guys. After the call, Lee is dangerously close to drinking his own orange juice. But right before he does, he hears a dripping sound. Hell yeah. He finds a gap between some debris that has a source of water dripping off a piece of rebar. He uses it to slowly refill his bottles and stay hydrated. Well, right now, Lee has just gotten a new chance. He can go months without food, in fact, if he has enough water. It's painful, yet possible. But he and Tenji couldn't have gone on without this water right here. We see the drill is also making progress as they hit tunnel cement, a good sign as they are probably close. Lee is listening to the car radio as they say they are relaying information for him to hear every night at midnight in case his phone dies, which I am very surprised it hasn't yet. I can't get mine to last for 2 days with minimal use, while he has been using his for over a week. They call Lee the next day and say the drill should be showing up any moment now, but there is still about 45 minutes left in the film, so I am sure something will go wrong. And yes, apparently due to a blueprint error showing the wrong number of fans, they drilled at the wrong spot. Well, this took them only moments to figure out by simply watching a video on a tunnel's construction and contacting an engineer who worked on it. Yeah, I kid you not, they did not take the time to do that double check before they started drilling, which is nuts. They will have to continue excavating and restart drilling at the correct spot, taking at least another 17 days to reach Lee. Well, good thing they have that backup plan, right? Hopefully the horizontal rescue team is doing a better job. I still don't know how this could have happened since fan number 3 should be at the same spot regardless of how many additional fans there are, but once we hear the news we have the same options we had before: sit and wait for help to arrive or attempt to dig ourselves out, and just like before, digging is still the more dangerous option. However, at this point we have waited long enough and need to pick the more dangerous path. Causing another collapse could kill us, that's right, but sitting and waiting for incompetent help could get us killed as well. Even if we have the willpower to wait, we don't know how long the water will keep dripping down for us, or if it will continue at all. Since we don't know if we have 17 days left, we should use our time at least trying to make some sort of path out. Using the direction our car is facing as a guide, we could start digging in the general direction that the excavation should be happening in, and hope to meet them somewhere in the middle. At this point, it should be better than sitting around doing nothing. Lee doesn't want to do that though, and instead wants to just give up. Kim hands the phone over to Se-hyun, his wife, to comfort Lee, but he says that he can't go on. The wife's response is, okay then, our child and I will die too, which is a bit extreme to say the least, and a little bit cheesy, but hopefully this was just a bluff to try and force Lee to start caring again, since she starts begging him to keep living right after. Before seeing if her words got through to him, the phone's battery finally dies. Now at this point we fast forward a week. The excavation team is struggling to move equipment because it is snowing. Chief Kim is desperately trying to get a single snowplow out there, but the city apparently needs literally all of them due to a shortage resulting in failed traffic collisions. Lee is sitting against the side of his car, door open and lights on, listening to the radio. They are sharing a letter his wife wrote for him. The camera shows a dashboard and we see the fuel reach empty and his power go finally out. Now he is able to get the power working again by putting the car in accessory mode, but the letter is already over. I guess this was enough to convince Lee to attempt an escape, because the next time we see him, he is trying to dig his way through the small gap he saw earlier. While this is an easy spot to start from, it is also facing away from the rescue effort, and thus not a smart way to travel in my opinion. But hey, if we can make it out, then great, I guess. Now we see rescuers cutting lengths of metal with a buzz saw, I guess to make supports for the sections of the tunnel they are excavating, when suddenly the saw breaks and a piece of the blade flies and stabs a man to death. This causes a public outcry over the rescue efforts, as the public and the government wonder if they should even continue trying, because with Lee's phone dead for all anyone knows, this could all just be to rescue a corpse. But Lee is still alive. In fact, right now he is draining his leg wound and cleans it with window washer as he continues to dig a hole further and further into the debris. Outside the tunnel, we see some business officials approach his wife. They want her to sign an agreement for resumption of construction on another tunnel nearby. Apparently, they had to stop construction on it while attempting to rescue Lee, since the new tunnel requires explosives to be set off, which could potentially put Lee in danger due to seismic activity. However, it is obviously costing them a lot of money by holding off, and taking more effort than they feel a life is worth. So, therefore, they want her to allow them to go back to construction. They go as low as to try and guilt her by asking, what if someone else gets hurt from your refusal? Which is a little pathetic if you ask me, but it clearly shows that they have truly given up on finding Lee alive. Now the only question is, has his wife Se-hyun given up as well? If we were in her position, the obvious solution is just to not sign. It's better to have a chance at saving a life and only recover a corpse than it is to give up on a life and guarantee a corpse. True, people are putting their lives on the line trying to save Lee here, but that is a risk that comes with being a savior, not an excuse to stop trying. Police officers and firefighters also have a high chance of death or injury on the job. That doesn't mean they should all just quit for their own safety. It just makes them even more heroic for doing what they do. But I guess they got her on a sweet spot. She gives a live broadcast to Lee, informing him of her choice to stop the rescue effort and apologizing profusely if he is still alive. Lee hears this and tries to get his phone working to let her know that he is still alive, but obviously can't manage to do it, so instead, he just focuses on digging his way out. Meanwhile, Chief Kim decides to go down the wrong drill hole they made before to see if he can get a proof of Lee still being alive. Because obviously Kim is the true greatest of all time and never stops caring about human lives. While down the hole, he uses a device to listen for Lee, but unfortunately construction on the new tunnel has begun already and they start blasting. They quickly pull up Kim though, for safety, so fast that he accidentally leaves part of the device down the tube. The seismic activity from the blast do start to cause further shifting and collapsing for Lee's tunnel, so he and Tenji rush back to his car for safety. He then crawls through the fan and into Mina's car and uses her car horn as a way to signal to anyone nearby that he is, in fact, still alive and down here. Now, it was mentioned briefly, way back at the start of the film, that his own horn doesn't work. Thankfully, Kim notices the device picking up the car horn sound and is now able to get the construction crew to stop the bombing. This was a brilliant idea from Lee. He probably recalled hearing a horn himself back when they were first inspecting the damage of the tunnel, and is using that same tactic here. It only works if someone is nearby to hear, of course, but thankfully people like him never give up and were there. Now next, after 35 days from the first collapse, they find Lee passed out. They give him first aid before loading him onto a stretcher, saving him and little Tenji, of course, as well. As they step out of the tunnel, they are swarmed by dozens of reporters trying to get an interview. Se-hyun, his wife, gets through and gives sorrowful love to Lee. After struggling to get past so many reporters, Lee whispers something to Kim. When asked what was stated, Kim hesitates before saying Lee's exact words, which basically went something like, "All of you assholes off," which I think we can all feel great sympathy for. The crowd goes silent as they then proceed to the chopper, with Lee given a generous thumbs up as a thanks for sharing his feelings. We then see sometimes later, Se-hyun is driving Lee from the hospital. They're about to go through a tunnel, to which I must say I am very surprised she didn't think to look for an alternative route. He looks nervous, understandably, so Se-hyun takes his hand as they enter. However, this time they come out the other side unscathed and continue their way home. Nice to see Lee isn't letting his traumatic event alter his way of living in any drastic ways. So, the moral of the story here is to obviously never give up. No matter how slim our chances are, giving up always makes those chances zero. So, hang in there and keep on trying, and eventually whatever your tunnel is could be beaten. Good luck, my friends, and thanks for tuning in. See you again next week, and take care.